I don't really want to dilly-dally on this one. You sent me your hot takes on Instagram. This is what I think about them. Here we go. I've thought about doing a video on this for a long time, but I just can't bring myself to because I slightly disagree. Yes, the average European ride is probably pound for pound better than the average US ride, but that doesn't take into account one key factor: quantity. There are just so many more major banger headlining coasters in the US than in Europe. For every one European banger, there's about 3 US ones that are pretty comparable. And maybe the European ones are the best out of those 4 or the second best, but the fact of the matter is there's still so much more in the US and so much more variety. There's just a lot more room for error and I guess mediocrity with these rides, because with so many more, there's bound to be some duds. But even so, honestly, I would say that the best of the US is overall better than the best of Europe. The starting lineup, quote unquote, for Europe would probably be Conda, Zadra, Carnin, Ride to Happiness, and Taiga. I haven't ridden any of them. I'm just taking like what I see to be the general consensus, and like any of those are pretty substitutable. Putting that against the US starters of Steel Vengeance, Velocicoaster, Fury 325, El Toro, and like the Voyage, I'm still taking the US's lineup. I will say though, I think European coasters are a lot more unique. Even rides that are similar to ones in the US have a little extra flair that makes them stand out, like the rock work on Wildfire or the theming on Terran. But I think whenever people make this comparison, people forget one key factor that makes it kind of a pointless debate. Europe is a continent and the US is just one country. It's kind of unfair to compare one of the 7 continents to just a single country. Say what you will about which lineup is actually better. The fact of the matter is the US still holding a candle in this debate speaks to how strong of a collection it is, because really there should be no debate that a continent made up of 50 countries could beat one. There's also a comment saying that Asia has a better collection. I don't know if you know your geography, but Asia is huge. I should hope that another 48 countries could easily beat out a measly US one. So even though I still say US is better than both, it's kind of pointless to debate. I full-heartedly do not agree with this one. Besides the fact that the track is over you, I have no idea why you would compare these two rides. They're not trying to do the same thing in any capacity whatsoever. You wouldn't compare Mako to Rougarou, would you? They're both B&M sit-down models, right? No. The Floorless Coaster and the Hyper Coaster are nothing alike, and it's so obvious that comparing these rides is stupid. So why are you comparing a Flyer with an Invert? An Invert is a compact, rip-your-face-off, intense speed machine, while these Flyers, for the most part, are pretty tame and graceful. For the most part. They have completely different elements and their layouts aren't structured at all the same. Also, it's just a completely different ride system. You're laying on your stomach, which automatically makes the experience completely different because you experience the forces completely different. I don't know why you'd ever compare these two models and claim that one is a lesser version of another, but I 100% disagree with that take. I do agree that inverts are better than Flyers in general, but still, there's no reason to compare these. This one I do agree with. I like Jersey Devil, but something is wrong with that ride. It feels nothing like its Wonder Woman counterpart in California, and not in a good way. It's just slower and staler and a little bit shorter, which are all not good attributes. Now, while I will admit I do have a little bit of bias for Nitro, I still think objectively it's a better ride than Jersey Devil. It has better airtime, a better drop, the most intense section on both rides, and is a pretty good bit longer. The only thing Jersey Devil would have it is pacing, just based on an RMC Raptor versus a Hyper, which would subsequently make all of its other aspects better, but it doesn't. It's pretty slow. So yeah, not a whole lot to talk about here. I'd take Nitro over Jersey Devil any day of the week. I'm working on it. I feel like this one is probably for shock value. I could understand if you said it's third behind Manta and Kraken. Agreed? No. But understand? Sure. I could probably wrap my head around it. However, there is no way you can say that Mako is worse than Icebreaker, Pipeline, and freaking Journey to Atlantis. I get if you don't like hypers because you think they're boring, but come on, it's not that repetitive. There's different types of hills and different configurations and some turns and stuff thrown in there. I just can't imagine how you could take this over this. Pipeline and Icebreaker are literally meant to be extreme family coasters. Yeah, extreme, but still meant for families. You can't claim that Mako is boring, then enjoy this ride. And Journey to Atlantis is barely a coaster. Like, if you like theming, I get it, but even so, this is not Walt Disney World theming. Mako is honestly the perfect hyper. It has a flawless layout, a great setting, a nice theme, a good color scheme, and pretty fast operations because it's SeaWorld. I don't know what they could do better, you just don't like hypers. Side note, there was another comment saying that Manta was the worst coaster at SeaWorld Orlando, which was really similar, and if you believe this, you just don't like flying coasters. This park is not Cedar Point. It doesn't have a world-class huge collection of rides. There's a pretty clear order here. So if you're not taking Manta or Mako or maybe Kraken at the top, you're just trolling. I disagree with this one too, but it's not as flagrant as the others. I could see how you would like the smaller, cozy feeling of an independent park like Lake Compounce or even Holiday World, but they still don't hold a candle to the chains. There's some good ones that put up a fight, namely Hershey and Holiday World, but nothing is really touching Cedar Point, Magic Mountain, Dollywood, BGW, BGT, Kings Island, the list just goes on. Most parks in the US now are big chain parks, so while it's nice to see smaller independent parks thrive every once in a while, they're usually just not as strong as the chains, and that makes sense. Roller coasters are an expensive business, so building a theme park usually requires a larger backing like that of a Six Flags or a Hershey. Also, I don't know if you're counting these, but Disney and Universal are technically chain parks, and those make something like Lake Compounce or even like Kennywood look like a traveling fair. This is probably one of the stupidest ones on the list. I feel like I'm disagreeing with most of these. I can't help it, you guys are just bringing some bad takes. Islands is so far from a half-day park. You can make the argument that it's a 2-day park. I just don't see how you could do all these rides in a couple of hours. Even if there were 0 crowds, not a line in sight, there's just so many rides to hit. Velocicoaster, Hagrid, Spider-Man, Forbidden Journey, Jurassic Park River Adventure, Hulk, Ripsaw Falls, the list just keeps going on. And yeah, there are a couple of rides you could skip like Kong, or maybe you don't want to do the water rides if you don't want to get wet, but really there is just too much to do and too much quality to be skipping. It's also just great to walk around these lands and feel the atmosphere. Obviously, Harry Potter Land excels at shrinking everything and making you feel like you're in Hogsmeade, but also the ruins of the Lost Continent and the comic book pops of Superhero Island are equally cool to be in. If you try to cram this park into a half day, you just won't get the full experience there is to offer, and that's really a shame because this is one of, if not the best parks in the US. This I agree with, though I don't know how hot of a take this is. Rides like Dragster, Cod, Dododumpa, and even Max Force to an extent are cool for their sheer magnitude of acceleration, but when I finish riding them, I always feel a little dissatisfied. And they're fine for the rides that they're trying to be. King Knott isn't trying to be a super well-rounded experience, it's just trying to be tall. But I'll always take a launch coaster with a full layout like a Blitz or even a mock multi-launch over a super high acceleration Speedster. It's just a more complete and interesting experience to me. Not a super hot take, so not a whole lot to say, but I agree. Okay, for the last one, I'm going to disagree. Now, while yes, Ka and Toro do add a ton to the lineup and elevate it to the GOAT status that Great Adventure has, they're not everything. The park still has a really diverse and just a really good lineup without those. Getting rid of them, you still haven't even touched the B&Ms, and there's an entire RMC single rail. There's also Zumanjaro, which I guess without King Knott probably wouldn't be there, but I'm still counting it because it's a huge plus for the park. In this hypothetical, I guess you're going on a day that Ka and Toro are closed, not just like actually removing them. There's also a new major coaster opening with a Flash this year that'll be the first large-scale new-gen Vekoma at a Six Flags park. I'm kind of defensive of this park because it's probably the closest thing I have to a home park and I've been to it a ton, but even so, I still think from an objective standpoint, it's still a great park. And that's just gonna about wrap up this video. Thank you guys so much for watching all the way to the end. Tell me in the comments what you agree with, what you disagree with, and tell me your hot takes below. I'll respond to as many as I can get to. If you've made it all the way this far to the end, comment toucan. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.